We're here at the birthplace of a Mayoman who had an audience of millions in the 20th century and called himself Our Lady's salesman. Patrick Peyton was born here in Attymass. One of 9 children, he was a bit of a rebel in his teenage years and was expelled from school at the age of 15. He was devout though, and prayer was important to him, especially the rosary. At the age of 18, he emigrated to Scranton, Pennsylvania with his brother. Several of his sisters were already there. He was determined to finish his education and enrolled in a high school there. He applied to several religious orders but was admitted to none, until finally he was accepted to the minor seminary of the Holy Cross Fathers in Notre Dame, Indiana. His training wasn't all smooth though. He had a terrible bout of tuberculosis at one point, but was unexpectedly healed. For him the reason was clear: the intercession of the Virgin Mary. A few years after his ordination, a dream was born: to use the new media to promote prayer. He was already presenting a weekly program on the Rosary on a local radio station in New York, but he knew that reaching a bigger audience meant making a move to the West Coast. So at the age of 36, with the permission of his superiors, he took the train to Hollywood. Somehow he managed to convince radio executives to give him an hour a week of airtime, nationally broadcast. The show was to be called Family Theatre. There was a catch though. He had to ensure the presence of one celebrity with him on each show. He made that commitment and he got networking. He was a novice in Hollywood, but a man on a mission. Soon enough, he had a network of major stars who committed their time to appearing with him on radio and praying the rosary with him. There were some major A-listers: Bing Crosby, Maureen O'Hara, Jimmy Stewart, Loretta Young and Grace Kelly. On one particularly moving episode, Father Peyton was joined by a husband and wife who had lost all 5 of their sons during World War II, the very family that inspired the movie Saving Private Ryan. In their grief, like so many others in the post-war period, they turned to prayer and led a national audience in praying the rosary. Very soon, Father Peyton's media ambitions grew, not just live radio, but drama for radio, TV and the cinema. He founded a production company which ended up producing 482 episodes dealing with themes of faith and morality, but also adapting literary classics for a popular audience. So a version of Moby Dick was dramatised, and Robin Hood, the Song of Roland, and episodes from Chaucer. Other shows were less high-minded, with titles like The Leprechaun Who Didn't Listen and The Littlest Angel. These were no second-rate productions though. Some of the big names of mid-century Hollywood starred in them, often donating their services for free. You'll recognise many of their names: Jane Wyatt, Henry Fonda, Gregory Peck, Lucille Ball, Bob Hope and William Shatner. A young James Dean received his very first acting credits in a family theatre movie, playing John the Apostle in a retelling of the Passion of Christ called Hill No. 1. Now around that time, Billy Graham was touring the world preaching the gospel. And Father Peyton did so too, and he kept up his massively popular stadium sessions right up to the 1980s. He visited Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and of course Ireland. 20,000 came to hear him in Knock in 1954. About 30 years later, a tour in the Philippines drew a total live audience of 2 million. His message was simple, focused on the basics of Christian faith and practice, and promoting especially family prayer. Together with marketing executives he knew, he came up with a memorable slogan: "The family that prays together stays together." His lifelong love for Our Lady shone through as well, and he promoted the Rosary to such an extent that he became known simply as the Rosary Priest. He was an outspoken critic of communism, and in the early 1960s, the CIA identified him as a potential ally in their global campaign against that ideology. They offered to fund his work, and Father Peyton, perhaps naive, perhaps overzealous, accepted. His superiors, and more importantly the Vatican, were uncomfortable with this relationship, and he was soon ordered to end it. That was a fairly brief blip though, in a long life dedicated to preaching the gospel with energy, intelligence and boundless creativity. He died in 1992 with the words of the Rosary on his lips. The internet was in its infancy in his final days, and we can only imagine what the man from Attymass, this extraordinary communicator, would have done with the communication tools now at our disposal.